Well, we'll just kick this off. We'll talk about this market and what we're looking at this week, because obviously we had a heck of a close to the week there over the last 2 days, and we'll have a lot to look at this week, especially with earnings season kicking off. It's gonna cause some action. I mean, this is typically when short-term traders love trading the most, is earnings season, because it's really when things get active. You got stocks waking back up. It can cause multi-day moves. The market can get crazy. So should be interesting. Plus, we'll have a pretty quiet week, I would argue, in terms of economics and hopefully news as well. That's the expectations, but we'll see. First of all, let's take a look at the good old market here, because we woke up. We woke up and we took off for 2 days. A lot of the moves were done overnight. We've talked about this a lot. It's not really surprising. I've shown that number and that those charts multiple times now, where if you buy the SPY overnight and you sell on the open, you're making 600% since like the 90s, versus buying it on the open, selling on the close, and you're probably red, negative for your career, maybe not quite red. So a lot of the SPY's moves are done overnight, both up and down. Most of the Corona drops were done in the after hours as well. So the action is usually done in the after hours, when the volume is light, when the algos are asleep, and when people are positioning themselves in the futures. So we'll see where we are Sunday night. We don't know where we're setting up yet for the week, whether we're just going to be where we left off at on Friday. It's been a relatively quiet weekend, I think, in terms of new headlines and things like that could move the market. So the question now is just going to be, do we get a pullback here? Do we see a little bit of rotation, accumulation in some of the lagging sectors? Because obviously the SPY took off and blew through the 50-day here. The Qs, however, still below the 50. They're still kind of chilling down here. They're trying to catch up best they can. They are kind of still making those higher lows. We are still kind of starting to round out here. And then small cap burst out of its kind of tightening range that we were going in here and doing. Did have a bit of a weaker Friday, obviously. So that's going to be the question here. So some of the notes that Mike wanted to make sure that I was looking at here. The Qs obviously still below the 50, but they're also below that 61.8 retracement. If you do Fibonacci's and you like looking at your retracements from high to low and so on, we haven't quite broken that retracement level. It kind of lines up with the 50-day. So we haven't quite retraced enough here. We are temporarily overbought. I mean, it wouldn't be that surprising. So on Mike's indicator here of this crazy 2-day buying, we obviously reached a little bit of overbought levels. It doesn't mean we're just going to immediately retrace. We do have two gaps here that we could fill, but I'm not going to bank on the SPY necessarily coming back to fill those gaps unless we get a headline that can send us down there anyway. The reason for that is looking back, and I've shown this before. I'll zoom out just a smidge, and then I'll zoom into the parts that I'm talking about here. When the market wakes up in gaps like that, especially back in November, almost the same exact period last year, we dipped below the 50, and then we gapped, and just never looked back. Same kind of deal here. We left a gap that we never filled. Last time we dipped below the 50 in September and October as well. The market can gap and leave gaps behind. So I know, obviously, as technical traders and just in general, we'd like to see gaps filled, but it doesn't always happen. We did it here in March as well this year. So the market can just gap and go. Ideally, we'll at least capitulate up here a little bit and not just continue this torrential run and leave all sellers behind. Volume's been pretty steady in here, so this wasn't a lack of participation either. So the question is just going to be, do we kind of pull back, maybe at least maybe test the 50, get the Qs, the IWM to catch up, see who's in control here, and then go into our November 3rd Fed taper meeting. That is going to be the question here, because we've got about 2 weeks now until that Fed taper meeting, where we already have that expectation set. So has that changed? First of all, because we still haven't gotten a good jobs print. Unemployment in general is coming down because the labor force is dropping. People are leaving the labor market and so on. But you have also 2 million more job openings than there are unemployed workers. Quitting jobs is at an all-time high, I believe. And you've got a very weak jobs being added into the economy here. So it's going to be interesting to see if that changes anything. It's unlikely it will. You do have obviously plenty of inflation concerns still out there. Consumer sentiment continues to implode. Inflation expectations in that consumer sentiment continues to spike to levels we haven't seen since I think the 70s or 80s. And so you've got a lot of those inflationary concerns out there. You've still got stagflationary concerns, GDP being cut across the board, both at the U.S. and internationally. So whether, rate, I think obviously we've talked about this as well. We don't think the market cares too much about tapering, but going into that meeting, we could see us maybe pop up a little more and continue running. I would not be surprised if the SPY continues and then eventually makes a new high in a week or two going into that Fed taper meeting. And then we'll see where we go from there. We did get rates kind of pull back a smidge in here. They were closed on Monday for Columbus Day, and so we had the bond market closed. And then afterwards, we just had a nice little dip back down to this kind of volume node here, if you will, in the TNX, and then we kind of bounded back up. Rates should likely continue to go up. The market knows they're going to go up. The market won't drop just because rates go up. It's all going to be about velocity. Someone over the week I've made some interesting kind of arguments from an economic side of things why they think rates will go down in the short term. It's an interesting read, but again, I'm not a macroeconomist. I'm just going to watch the rates and judge accordingly. So that's what we're going to have to see. I mean, looking at the levels here, what are the levels I'm at least watching in this market going in here? So we're going to be watching around this 447-ish, 447.50-ish. I mean, with the market, it's a bit of a range, but this is a little bit of a technical level. We've seen failures from here. We've seen support from in here. It's not a massive level, in my opinion. I think more I'd like to see us pull back and confirm the 50-day, which at this point is right around Thursday's close here, around this 442. Obviously, the bigger level would be getting back up towards those highs. You can also look at the Qs, maybe get some better stacked levels. We closed right at a pretty decent resistance level, this resistance level here from the end of summer, and then it also came back into play in this most recent downturn here, this kind of 369.50-ish. This is also coinciding with where the 50-day is stacked. So I think we get through that on Monday. Then you've got a little bit of room above you, a little bit of room to wiggle, chop around, and then maybe we see the Qs. Maybe we see the Qs gradually hold up and start pushing their way higher. You've got some room until the next resistance. We talked about small caps. They were tightening in here as we kind of coiled in, and we kind of burst out. I would love to see them get back in control here. Let's not forget that last year, right around this time period almost, when we dipped below the 50-day into November, the IWM was then our leader. It was our leader for a good 2-3 months. It absolutely exploded, and value plays were strongly in favor for a brief moment, while the Qs were going up, but at a much more gradual, kind of flattening rate of ascension there. So this is what I'd like to see. I'd like to see these value plays get some more life. I'd like to see that, especially now that we're in earnings season, we'll probably see a lot of opportunity for these value plays to talk about how we're doing and how they're doing and their expectations. Earnings are going to be a big deciding factor on some of this. We've already seen a taste of earnings last week. So for example, the airlines really got hit after Delta reported earnings, and they reported in here and they got crushed mainly because they talked about, profitability is going to suck because of energy costs. So the energy prices rising exponentially, really going to be squeezing airlines. Now this week we have more airlines reporting. You have American Airlines and Southwest and Alaskan Air on Thursday. So we'll see if they kind of reiterate the same thing. And if that's pretty much across the board, you also have a United Airlines Tuesday after the close. Then we might see a little bit of difficulty there. You're seeing some similar-ish kind of weakness in the cruise lines, and I think that's probably because they probably burn a lot of fuel to move those things, and so it would be expected that they are likely going to be experiencing some similar margin pressure. They don't report this week yet, so we have some time on that, but we're just going to have to see how those guys do as well. So we'll see. We will have to see on that one. Meanwhile, we're seeing kind of some of those sectors that kind of were leading us before kind of wake back up. We saw AMD starting to really ascend here, get back up to the highs. NVIDIA kind of woke back up. They're kind of pushing back higher. Some of the semiconductors in general just bounced off the 200-day. So we'll see if those guys can wake back up. And then meanwhile, healthcare, You had a couple healthcare companies report. The ETF itself is still a little descended, but for example, United Health had very good earnings, and they're back up here. So I'm going to be curious to see if the healthcare sector leads us again. We'll have to see. But anyway, so that's what we're going to have to watch and wait for. Like I said, news is going to be slow this week. Monday, we'll have industrial production and the housing market index. That's it. Tuesday, some more housing numbers. Wednesday, really not much at all. Petroleum and like your bond auctions. And then Thursday and Friday, some small things like PMI and so on. So I think it's going to be relatively quiet. We'll see if the market can hold up here, if it wants to fill one of those gaps, maybe get a little bit of cooling off, and then we'll begin our ascent again as we get closer and closer to the taper meeting. But no one knows where the market's going to go. We're just going to have to see because, I don't know if we're going to get any more headlines or anything because you still have the energy crisis going on out there. Let's not forget that is still a big driver right now. I mean, look at oil. Oil finished at highs easily. I mean, it absolutely couldn't be stopped. You even had someone like Putin coming out saying that he could see oil at $100 a barrel and that he's not going to do anything to drastically drop that price because let's not forget he and the Saudis are best friends along with China, so they're not going to be doing anything there to disrupt that to an extent. Nat gas got a little bit of a pullback, which is good, I suppose. But we're just going to have to see what the energy crisis continues to develop because there are a lot of expectations on effects it's going to have on China's GDP and on a lot of European companies going into the winter. So we're going to have to see if that can get relieved anytime soon. Obviously, Evergrande's still in the background. We haven't heard anything from that in a while. China did actually come out and say that they think the risk is controllable and unlikely to spread. Meanwhile, they say that you also have one or two other companies that are experiencing similar liquidity issues. So it's obviously something we need to keep an eye out on as more and more dollar bonds continue to default. So we'll see there. With the inflation expectations and things like that, you had some other stuff moving. Obviously, you had gold wake back up briefly, and then Friday got absolutely smacked. A little bit of a technical pullback, in our opinion. I don't think that was anything really fundamentally shifting. That's why you didn't really see an equivalent move in the dollar. So we'll see if that one can bounce. I think gold will probably just come back up and get back up to the mean there. And then let's talk about Bitcoin and crypto because they had some fun. They had some fun this week, and I think they'll continue to show that strength. So the expectations are we could see the Bitcoin ETF as early as this week, maybe make it to its debut next week. If not, that's going to be a pretty big deal for crypto. That's likely one of the main reasons we're running here. Part of it is risk off and inflation hedge, but a big part of it is kind of hype running up into the ETFs of Bitcoin and these crypto ETFs being approved. That'll add a lot more attention and probably staying power to crypto as well once you start seeing these funds accumulating and getting some exposure. So we'll have to see how that progresses. The SEC was tweeting about it as well, so you saw you saw the SEC really also kind of almost pumping crypto to an extent because they were tweeting stuff about being prepared and investing intelligently into crypto funds. So we'll see. We'll see what Bitcoin does, but it's definitely been fun to watch, and it's given us a lot of stock opportunities. So on that note, I'm just going to go through a couple of the stocks and things that we're watching and some of the ones that we like that are setting up here. We'll go sector-wise and earnings-wise and things like that, and then we can take some questions. And so I also have Mike's list of stocks here. Looking at Mike's list first, I know he's watching this Sophie. Sophie obviously had a nice little break through the 200 days. Spent the last 3 days kind of stuck in here, so almost stuck in the mud. A little bit lesser volume, but nothing too substantial. I think we just need it to kind of wake back up here over the next couple of days. You see it flagging up here. I think if it gets through this 1980, maybe it wakes back up and continues. Otherwise, if it starts dropping some lows here, you'll probably see a pullback to that 200-day. But we'll see if Sophie can continue. I know he traded NVIDIA. And he's watching NVIDIA. He likes NVIDIA, obviously best of breed, and I like that it's ascending here. You have a nice clean ascension of lows, kind of burst through the 50-day. So if this gets back up into this volume node, maybe you get a trade on like a burst back up towards the highs. I don't know if that would be some immediate continuation. You'd probably have some time there. But we'll see there. TAN, obviously, we talked about this all last week. Solar and some of the alternative energies out there did get some love, did get some attention and some rotation. We'll see if that continues. That I have no idea. It's just going to be the question in terms of obviously there wasn't that much of a of headlines for solar or for uranium, though we did get some uranium headlines in Europe. But the question is going to be, is there enough volume and interest to push us through this 200-day? I don't think we see another move like we saw in tan in here. This was a Biden expectation play, so taper expectations in that way. But if it does wake back up, and after this we break out of this range back through the 200, I think there would be some very good trades off of that. So we'll have to see. He was watching PBW. I'm not quite sure about this ETF. He was also watching SIX because you've got some descending highs in here. We're kind of wedging right above this 200-day pretty nicely, kind of tightening in here. So he's going to be watching Six Flags. Not sure when their next earnings are, but I don't believe it's this week, so I think you'll have some time on that. Some other stocks he's watching as well. Tesla woke back up on Friday. I mean, this thing's just, the Tesla stands continue to buy. It feels like they keep throwing out these micro headlines and headlines as often as they can. Tesla does report earnings this week, so they report Wednesday after the close. So you could get a run up into those earnings. That also could be what we're already seeing because we've seen them having really good China numbers, good China deliveries. They've been suckling up to China lately a lot anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised to see some beat on that. I think that's the expectation, which is why we're seeing that run up, and that run up could continue into earnings. And then maybe we get a sell the news event. So we'll have to see. But Tesla's been really in play. And then obviously there are some Bitcoin plays in general. HUT, nice breakthrough 11, smaller price stock that's been a really good trader when it trends with Bitcoin. Friday rather, nice and strong, held off of VWAP the whole time. And then Mara, let's not forget about our favorite right now, Mara, which has been, if I pull up the daily here, breaking through some levels. So if Bitcoin continues this week, those will be probably our two that we focus on the most because they do the most movement. Uber continues to look good as well. Really ascending here. It's not really been a good day trader, and I don't think that's been the intention on day trading this. It's only good day trading when they have headlines. Like, for example, what started this move in terms of them expecting to have their first quarter of profitability upcoming here. So, we'll see. But it's been really good. We are at a pretty interesting little inflection point here, and then you've got a little bit of room to the 200. So a lot of the meat on this move is probably up at this point. But we'll keep a loose eye on this one. I know Mike's been watching a lot of the consumer discretionary stuff. Oh, sorry, not FCX, XLY. There we go, XLY. Breaking out, absolutely bursting out. And this for one main reason. That is because I believe the two largest stocks in this ETF are Tesla and Amazon. And Amazon had a hell of a Friday. So you saw a really nice breakout on Amazon on Friday, after kind of wedging back up into this 200-day. Kind of did a little double bottom here and broke back out. So we'll see if that continues. But those two really helped the consumer discretionary ETF, and a lot of those stocks kind of wake up. So those stocks might be in play as well. MGM, Mike is watching MGM. I know, Chris watched this not too long ago, earlier in the week, and now it's kind of flagging up in here. So the question is going to be, do you get the break of the flag on the downside, which is where we were kind of setting up for, and then maybe you get a pullback, maybe down to this pullback point, or maybe to the breakout point itself, or do we kind of just do a little dip and then curl back up and rocket our way through higher? That was a nice little breakout, so it's setting up pretty nice technically. The question is just going to be which way it breaks in, if there's enough volume. Obviously, stocks like Home Depot and Lowe's, both in breakout mode there. I don't know if I'm super keen on jumping in them up here, but if they set up something technically, you could probably get a good short-term trade off of that. We'll continue to watch IBM. Failed the last time we tried this breakout, but this 10-year descending highs here is what we're watching ever since 2013. We've touched on this descending high several times, kind of starting to push up into it again. So the question is going to be, can we break through, get towards that 150, and then maybe get some little bit of a long-term swing on IBM. So we're keeping an eye on that one up here as well. Pretty interesting level to watch there. Other than that, that's most of the top stocks that I know Mike's watching. I'll go through some of the ones that I've been watching as well. First of all is going to be the Silvergate Capital. Had a nice breakout in here when I was originally watching it. This is a financial that also is involved in stablecoin and crypto to an extent. So they've been flagging around up here. I want to see if we start looking like we'll reapproach these highs. Maybe we get a second move, but that may not happen this week. My altas continue to break. I actually kind of want to pull back now, just for my own sanity. But again, I don't know if we get that this week or not. I'm going to watch a couple of the China plays. So Futu was really good on the short side the last 2 days. This one had a note going around about some regulatory issues potentially. They tried to come out and say that no, we're working within all of the requirements within China for that. Who knows? Are they in compliance or not? It's also a China play, which gives it an added layer of risk. And then Bank of America double downgraded it to underperform from buy on Friday, down and lowered their price target by like 100 points or something. So you saw some nice dropping on that one. At this point, it's kind of up in open air. We'll see if it kind of continues to bleed off. I expect it will. And on the flip side, you then have kind of Alibaba almost looking like it wants to bounce a little bit. I don't know if I would ever swing a China play, but when this one moves, it's been a really good day trader. So I might keep an eye on this one. We had Charlie Munger in here buy, and that kind of ended up causing almost a short squeeze to an extent. He was doubling down because he's been underwater in this one. But it's holding up at the moment, setting up these higher lows. So it might have some opportunity if volume pops back in here, if we break through a level. Again, I'm not long-term swinging these plays. I think there's still way too much risk in China. But, Mike did make good points in terms of buying when others are fearful in sectors and things like that can sometimes really be a good strategy. So we'll have to see if we start bottoming in here. Other than that, I'll watch this OCGN because what was weird is I believe we were supposed to get a WHO, World Health Organization, ruling on their vaccine last week. I did not see that happen. We actually got something from India kind of looking to approve it for younger and adolescent children last week, but we're still kind of waiting on that. So a lot of this is kind of hype and retail driving it up in anticipation. So we'll see if we get that headline. Maybe it wakes it back up and we start popping a little bit more. But we'll just have to wait and see if we get that headline. Obviously, Upstart had a nice breakout as well. This one, it's obviously getting overvalued. It's running too far. This is retail. This is not fundamental reasons. Volume's increasing. We're pushing nicely. So this one is, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. We got to the psychological $400 level, saw a little bit of resistance. We'll see where we go from here. Kind of that little tightening we saw on Friday. Maybe we get something on this one. Maybe we get something on this one this week. If we're lucky, maybe it just continues higher, and then we'll get a short at some point. But I'm not going to be the first to short this thing because I've seen them continue to go. But this one's been very good when it's in play and moving and trending. Affirm, kind of same kind of deal. This one actually has some news catalyst that's been setting up their partnership with Amazon, partnership with Target. Something else came out in here as well. I do like that it's holding in here up at these highs. I think that this one could still have some room to go up on the higher, so long as it doesn't start dropping around this 144-ish. That's kind of what I'm watching closely because that seems to be a little bit of our floor at the moment. If it does drop that, then we'll probably pull back to an extent. So we'll see, but it's been in play here and there. I might watch Alcoa for a second day play on Monday. They had really good earnings towards the end of the week here. Aluminum and a lot of those metals and commodities in general seeing some serious inflation, some serious rising in their futures prices, partially due to lack of supply, partially because of the energy crisis. So you're seeing a nice little breakout there. And I just want to see if maybe we get a second day play. The issue is I'm not going to watch this one for too long because it tends to just grind after a couple of days and doesn't do a ton of movement in terms of its ATR, but I might give it just another one just to see. Snapchat kind of looks like we could get a breakout this week. This one's been in a bit of a range and a consolidation for a couple of months now. really been tight in here for some time, and I think if this gets back up towards this 80 and we get another breakout, I'd like to see that one go. It's just kind of grinding at the moment, so the biggest issue with that one is if it does break, still probably going to be pretty low in volume, so I got to taper expectations there personally, but we'll see what we get in terms of that. Some of the banks and financials, I mean, I don't like them long term for swings, but you are getting a technical breakout. We just had a lot of them report earnings. Bank of America had really good earnings. That one's breaking out. Goldman Sachs did, but that one's not quite breaking out, but it is back above its 50-day, so maybe people rotate back into that. Charles Schwab as well, breaking out, so I might watch some of them if they set up nicely for me. But that's going to be a bit, I'm going to be picky on those because I don't like trading the banks a lot. Unless they're in play for earnings or something, because they're just financials and they're kind of boring and slow sometimes. I'll watch Lithium, LAC or LTHM, either of them really. Kind of broke out last week and spent the last bit of the week just kind of flagging around up here. I think if LAC gets back through 26, I'd like to see that one continue. Lithium, LTHM, a little bit of a laggard, but holding up here at 52-week highs. So. If lithium continues to see that play, it could be interesting. And I have no idea what's going to happen with uranium, but it did get a little bit of life here. I know Bornholm and a couple of the guys in chat during our podcast were warning that this price spike happened prior without the equivalent movement in the actual uranium futures and prices. We did finally start to see that move happen at the end of the week. We got a couple European headlines from a couple of countries like France and so on that are really trying to incorporate into uranium. But it's kind of like solar, these alternative energies with the energy crisis got a little bit of extra pop and interest. Retail definitely flooded in here as well. The question is going to be, can we get back through this, or is this going to be a double top? I don't know, but I'm going to be watching it because if it does break, it could be really good. On that energy side of things, you obviously have plenty of energy stocks out there that could give opportunity. Devon Energy, if that decides to break, I know Apache had a nice stronger end to the week. That one really kind of started taking off. Or you could go to some of the solar companies if you want. There's plenty. SunPower. Woke back up, failed off the 200-day, but it hasn't dropped off yet. So that one gets through the 200. Maybe you get some squeeze there. So you could really pick and choose in the energy sector depending on what's kind of breaking levels. But I think something in the energy sector will likely be in play this week. I'm just going to wait and see which one breaks. I'm not going to try to front run anything. In terms of earnings this week, because we actually have some good ones this week, I'm just going to burn through that list just to kind of set some expectations here. Monday, super quiet. I think Monday is going to be super quiet in general in the market. Mondays typically are. People are really just kind of going to be watching and waiting and setting themselves up. No earnings, no real headlines, no real economics. We'll see what happens. But then Tuesday, you've got Johnson & Johnson reporting. Curious about them, obviously, in terms of their sales with the vaccine and so on. You'll have Philip Morris, which I know I've played before because that one can really go. Procter & Gamble, Synchrony Financial, which I know several of us have played before as well. And then Tuesday, after the close, is going to be Netflix. Now, I have very, very high expectations on Netflix earnings. I actually really do this week. And I think the market probably does as well, which is probably why we've seen Netflix kind of really starting to ramp up here. And that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, Netflix has had a lot of hype and a lot of talk going around it over the last 2 weeks. You've had the Dave Chappelle special, which got a ton of press. I mean, people on both sides were freaking out about it, not freaking out about it, to the extent where some of their employees got so worked up about it, they tried to sneak into I think it was a board of directors meeting, so they got fired. So there's been all sorts of press in that, but there's also the Squid Game and all of those things that people have just been nonstop talking about lately. So I just have expectations in terms of I think they've probably got, even if it's a short-term thing, a boost in subscribers. We also haven't heard anything since, I believe it was in here, where they really talked about their movement into the video game industry and what they're doing there. I don't think we've really heard much. So I want to see if they use that to try to hype at all looking forward. We'll see. But they have earnings Tuesday after the close. I'm very curious about that, and so does United Airlines, which could shed some more light in terms of what they're looking like. Um, in terms of Wednesday, you'll have a couple. I know several of us and several of the people in that chat trade NEE. I believe it's like a utilities energy play to an extent. They report earnings Wednesday. That could be pretty interesting. You got a couple more kind of healthcare companies, Abbott, Anthem, some stocks like that. So I want to see the healthcare and BIIB, which obviously had that fun in summer when their Alzheimer's drug came into play. I don't think we get much out of those personally, but we'll see. Wednesday, we have LVS. I'm very curious about LVS's earnings because they were just starting to set up a nice little rebound here for me. It's going to be really unfortunate if that kind of takes the wind out of that. You also have Tesla, like I've already mentioned, Wednesday after the close, and IBM, which is doing this breakout. I really hate when I get a nice technical play setting up and then they have earnings, because then I'm never going to hold that into earnings because it wins great. If it doesn't, it completely implodes and ruins my chance. So we'll have to see what that one does as well. Thursday, you'll have a couple more airlines, American Airlines, Southwest Airlines. You'll have Nucor as well, Tractor Supply Company, which kind of rebounded after these last disappointing series of earnings. So we'll see if any of those guys can get going. You also have AT&T and Verizon, but look, these companies have kind of sucked in terms of stock charts for some time now. So maybe this kind of becomes a bottoming action for them. Dow Chemicals, I know a couple people I have been trading that, I believe, in the chat. So this one's kind of depressed down here. I'd like to see if that one can wake back up. Thursday after the close, you've got Chipotle. As these food companies and companies that have been directly influenced are impacted rather by two things, inflation and wage inflation. Inflation in food and inflation in wages. Chipotle is one of the first ones that raised their wages pretty quickly here a while back. And I can attest that in my local area of Hunt Valley, Maryland, where I'll travel a bit up north to go to the closest Chipotle. I tried to go there on Thursday, and they had a sign at like 1 p.m. So this is around lunch, closed due to lack of staff. So I don't know if that's a widespread thing. I'm not going to use that to assume that the whole company can't staff itself, but I'm curious to see what those earnings are, especially since they've been relatively strong. So that's going to be interesting. Snapchat as well, which is unfortunate because they're getting ready to break. Mattel, which woke up last earnings and then died again, and Intel. I want to see what Intel reports on earnings because Intel and Micron have been kind of the bastard stocks in that sector. Micron just had disappointing earnings. So now I think all pressure's on Intel to hopefully buck the trend there and catch up with the rest of those stocks. But that is it, really. There are obviously plenty of other earnings in there. I'm not going to go into each and every one, but those are some of the most interesting ones to me. A lot of stocks that you could be watching out there, whether you go earnings-based, whether you go energy-based, or whether you just go technicals. There's going to be a lot of opportunity, or Bitcoin, or anything like that. It's a good time to be a short-term trader because there's a lot of stuff moving, a lot of stuff setting up and in play. Even a long-term trader, I mean, we're still setting up nicely. So we'll just have to see what actually sets up levels and what gives us some opportunity here. I didn't see any IPOs that I really have any expectations for this week. I'll just let them open, and then if any of them set up nicely for second day plays, I'll do that. I think we might be getting some slightly larger ones later in the week, but it's nothing that substantial, so expectations are low. But that's it for me, and that's it for what me and Mike are watching. So, yeah,